week. What time of the week is it? Well, it is the time where we cut through the BS and challenge the establishment with our deft leftist analysis. It is time for the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. I'm William Walton, filling in for Andy Argo, and I am joined here today by...
I am Miller.
And we have a whole lot to talk about. If you were listening to my music program before this, you know that we're going to have some fine folk from Extinction Rebellion on at around 7 p.m. But before that, we just have a couple of stories to talk about. First and foremost, George Zimmerman, that is the man who killed Treyvon Martin back in 2012. So that would have been my freshman year of high school, a long, long time ago. George Zimmerman is suing Trayvon Martin's family and others for $100 million. That is the headline taken from the Sun Sentinel. This article is by Lisa J. Harass. Excuse me there. And I'm just going to read a brief bit of it for you, and then we're going to discuss. So, George Zimmerman, the man acquitted of killing unarmed black teen Trayvon Martin in 2012, is now suing the boy's family, their attorneys, and the prosecutors for damages in excess of $100 million. Zimmerman, a former Neighborhood Watch volunteer, has said he was defending himself while being attacked when he shot and killed Martin, 17, in a gated community in Central Florida city of Sanford in February 2012. Martin, who lived in Miami Gardens, was visiting his father at the time. Zimmerman's trial and acquittal sparked protest and a national debate about race relations. The Justice Department later decided not to bring a civil rights case against Zimmerman. The lawsuit alleges malicious prosecution by prosecutors, defamation by both Martin's defense attorney and a book publishing company, and civil conspiracy by Martin's family and lawyer to put on a false witness with made-to-order false storyline to fraudulently create probable cause to get in conviction. Again, this is from the Sun Sentinel. I'm going to skip a bit just to get some more context on how this comes up. So this lawsuit follows a film that was scheduled to play at the Coral Gables Art Cinema on Thursday after a press conference, but the theater posted on Twitter on Wednesday that it was not aware of all the details surrounding the event and has made the decision to cancel it. The film... Excuse me here. The film alleges that the prosecution's key witness in 2013 murder trial, Rachel Jeantel, was an imposter and fake witness. Director Joel Gilbert is known for conspiracy theories. Other documentaries by Gilbert include 2012's Dreams from My Real Father, based on the unsubstantiated theory that President Barack Obama's father was secretly an American communist. He also reportedly advanced the debunked claims that Obama's wedding ring is inscribed with a Muslim prayer and President Bill Clinton had a secret son with a prostitute. The complaint alleges that in March 2012, the Stanford Police Department closed the case as self-defense, but a week later, Crump produced an audio recording of Diamond Eugene, who is Martin's 16-year-old girlfriend, who was on the phone with Martin just before the altercation with Zimmerman, the complaint said. The complaint alleges 2 weeks later, an 18-year-old Rachel Jeantel told prosecutors she was Diamond Eugene and provided false statements to incriminate Zimmerman based on coaching from others. So, just in short, what has happened is a conspiracy theory documentary director made a documentary and a book, it appears, also a book, claiming that there was a conspiracy against George Zimmerman, that the crucial witness in the case was false. And again, judging by his other films, especially the Barack Obama one, I'm getting a bit of Alex Jones vibes from this director. But truth be told, I haven't heard the name before, so I don't know how accurate that comparison truly is. But clearly some very unsubstantiated, rumors here. And this sparked Zimmerman to sue for $100 million defamation charges. And I'd like to point this out. Zimmerman was acquitted. This isn't someone trying to get out of punishment or anything. He was acquitted. He just thinks, oh, this hurt my reputation. So before I get into what I think, do you have anything you think about this story, Aya?
I think I agree. It sounds like he's trying to save himself from himself. Like, after the shooting happened, he got himself into so much more trouble just with, I think, he was accused of domestic violence by his girlfriend, and then his life kind of went down the drain, and it sounds like he's trying to blame all of that on the case that happened, which is absolutely insane.
Like, exactly. First of all, granted, I was a bit young when it happened, but if you don't remember what happened with Treyvon Martin, the bulk of Zimmerman's self-defense argument was that he was scared because he saw a young black man wearing a hoodie, and he tried to argue that it was not a racially motivated killing, that it was self-defense, but there was extremely limited evidence, nothing substantial at least, showing that he was being threatened by Martin. However, there wasn't enough to convict him either, so he was acquitted. But what really gets me here, aside from all that nonsense and the fact that, in my opinion, Zimmerman definitely should not have been acquitted, is the $100 million in damages. Like, it seems to me that his argument here is that this has harmed my ability to make money. It's harmed my reputation. I can't get jobs, whatever. So there's damages, defamation. But $100 million, even if this hadn't happened, that is well in excess, I imagine, of his earning potential. That's an insanely high number for this man. It's just, I know I say this all the time on the show, but it's asinine. Like, it doesn't make sense. I know I say this a lot too, but I think everything since really mid-2015, everything's just gotten dumber. Things are still bad. They're just as bad, but now they're dumb bad. I know it's not the most like academic sort of way of phrasing it, but I honestly don't have a better word for it. Like,
that's really the only word you can use for it. Like, how much would he even be? What does he even do? Even as like a neighborhood watchman or something along those lines? Like, how much would he even make a year at that? Like, I know it definitely was not $100 million.
Yeah. So, Zimmerman, it's not just a suit against the family. He's also suing civil rights attorney Crump and HarperCollins publishers, accusing them of defaming him in Crump's book published in October called Open Season, Legalized Genocide of Colored People. Quote, with actual malice, knowing the untruth, or at minimum, a reckless disregard for the truth, according to the lawsuit. Crump on Wednesday responded in an email sent by his office saying that it was on behalf of himself, Fulton, and Tracy Martin, Treyvon Martin's father. This, quote, this plaintiff continues to display a callous disregard for everyone but himself, re-victimizing individuals who are shattered by his own misguided actions. And that's another thing. We haven't even talked about this yet. But not only did George Zimmerman kill these people's child, now he's asking for them to relive it a second time in the courtroom to get money. Like, this is so scummy. And again, George Zimmerman was acquitted. I don't think he should have been, but he was acquitted. He could have just gone on and lived his life, and it would have been... We shouldn't have to hear from him. Like, he's just bringing himself into the spotlight, and I really hope this case gets dismissed. I really do, but I don't see it getting dismissed. And I'm just really curious what the legal argument is going to be. I mean, $100 million from the family and lawyers of the person you killed because they tried to argue that, and let's be honest, they accurately argued that you killed him because you're racist and you don't like being known as the guy who is racist and killed a kid, so you're trying to say that it was a conspiracy. And the best guy you can get up to come with your conspiracy is the Obama's dad was an American communist, Joel Gilbert. It's just dumb. It's awful, and it's sad again. Like digging the whole family, the whole Martin family, back into this 7 years later, basically forcing them to relive it, knowing that they're not going to get, Zimmerman in jail. Double jeopardy. He's been acquitted. So all this does, even if he loses the lawsuit, and granted he'll have legal fees, he's basically given a free pass to essentially harass this family, right? Like,
without a doubt.
It feels it doesn't just feel like harassment. I feel like this is definitely, even if it doesn't fit the legal definition, in a sort of it when you see it way, this is definitely harassment. I
think I was reading an article earlier that mentioned this. I think he was actually charged with harassment for some for targeting someone who made a movie about Treyvon Martin. I could be wrong about that, but it seems like it would fit in line with his history and what he's done in the past. And sometimes I sit and wonder, like, how can people like this exist in the world? I just can't. Some people, I guess, just have to take it to the farthest extreme, which is really, really sad.
You're actually right. Just pull that up. So this is from the Post. George Zimmerman charged with stalking man who was working on a Trayvon Martin documentary. So this is behind a paywall. I'm looking to find more information, see if the charges went anywhere. But George Zimmerman was charged with stalking a private investigator who was hired to help look into his life for a Trayvon Martin documentary. Let's see. This is in May of 2018. CNN here is also on it. And then... Yep, this is from CNN, Eric Levinson. George Zimmerman, the man who was acquitted of murder in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin, has received a criminal summons for stalking, the Seminole County Sheriff's Office said in a press release on Monday. Zimmerman is accused of repeatedly threatening and harassing Dennis Warren between December 16th and 25th of last year, the Sheriff's Office said. Warren is a private investigator hired by a production company that was working on a documentary about Martin's life, according to CNN affiliate WKMG. Deputies said Zimmerman called Warren 55 times, left 36 voicemails, texted him 67 times, and sent 27 emails over a 9-day span, WKMG reports. I'm not seeing anything about whether or not these charges went anywhere, but regardless, as you said, there definitely is a history there. And I think this points to, as again I said, not only is Zimmerman, this is clearly malice, suing a family after you've shot their child. But also, and this just might be the former PR student in me speaking, it makes no sense if you're honestly concerned about your reputation, which is what a defamation lawsuit would indicate, because you're acquitted. Legally, it has been said you are not criminally liable for this. At that point, don't you just live your life like...
I would, if anything, if I was Zimmerman, I would write a book about it, because you would make a lot more money than you would for a lawsuit that wouldn't go anywhere.
Exactly. Let's be real, Zimmerman. Scrap the lawsuit. If you're going to be this malicious anyway, be a terrible person. Become a right-wing radio host. Alex Jones is banned on Twitter and YouTube. There's a void, is all I'm saying. You don't need to drag the family into this. With that, it's about 6:30 now. We're going to take another quick break, give you the sounds of Quantum Fleek. When we get back, we're going to have a few more stories for you. And then, like I said, at 7 o'clock, we're going to have the wonderful folk from Extinction Rebellion on to talk about what they did on Black Friday in the Crossroads Mall. All that coming right up.
Let alone that, it might be like a black rapper like DMX or something. Just the racial overtones of it, was so hard. What were you thinking when I signed on? It was never going to be a black rapper, white rapper, Asian, Hispanic rapper, anything case is that Treyvon wound up beating this guy down, you know, and this was bad. He had marks on the back of his head, and now he wants to fight. He's a fighter. You know, do you understand how there was a contradiction there?
Yes, and again, that fraction of people that said that are a small percentage that don't realize that a boxing match with a referee in controlled conditions are significantly different than being mounted as the witness stated, ground and pounded. If I went out there and I got beat up, the charity was still getting paid. I don't want to get beat up, but I saw it as an opportunity. I never expected it to turn out the way it did.
George Zimmerman seems to feel that way about a lot of things. For example, becoming the face of white-black tensions in America.
I actually had 2 full Peruvians raise me and 1 American, so I felt almost like 2/3 of my upbringing was that Peruvian. I had black people in my family, so it was very shocking to me that simply based off my last name would make that presumption.
Though he's at the center of a debate about self-defense laws, he has little to say about them.
Because of what you've done and what your case was about, do you have feelings about self-defense and where the line should be and what's right and what's wrong? Do you have thoughts about that?
I am not well-versed enough to tell you. I feel until I sit down and I study the Constitution and probably 10 years worth of legal findings, I wouldn't be able to draw a solidified conclusion, and I don't want to do what others have done to me and speak without examining information and facts. I do, however, support our Second Amendment right.
You might think Zimmerman would be riveted to the Michael Dunn trial, given its comparisons to his own situation.
I guess I should have prefaced this interview by letting you know that I don't watch news anymore. I watch comedy shows, home improvement shows. So I'm not well enough informed to give you exacts.
How about advocating for the stand your ground laws that many identify with him?
Are you comfortable being the face of stand your ground?
I'm not comfortable being the face of anything, to be honest with you.
It's what Zimmerman wants to be the face of going forward that may be the most confounding. Justice.
What do you want to do with your life?
Good. I'd like to professionally be in my education. Hopefully become an attorney. I think that's the best way to stop the miscarriage of justice that happened to me from happening to somebody else. I don't think it should happen to anyone ever again.
What was the miscarriage of justice?
The fact that 2 law enforcement entities stated that I had acted within the laws of our nation in self-defense.
You don't think it was about the law?
I know it wasn't. Yes.
And what does that make you?
The government.
Using a cell phone while driving leads to 1.6 million crashes a year. Help us reduce that number by keeping your eyes off your phone and on the road.
On something that matters to a lot of
This has been a friendly reminder from Wider.
Thinking or why they're thinking it. All I know is that they're doing it. I don't know what agenda they have.
The case is over, but the judgment continues. While George Zimmerman may have won his freedom, he will probably never be truly free.
I have a lot of people saying that, you know, they guarantee that they're going to kill me and I'll never be a free man. I realize that they don't know me. I've learned that the majority of people, when they sit down with me one-on-one or with my family and I, they get a completely different perspective on me.
When you're somewhere and people recognize who you are and they're looking at you, what do?
Smile.
How often do they smile back?
Hi, this is Justine from Math the Band. You're listening to WIDR 89.1 Kalamazoo.
Welcome back to the Hoodrat Strategist on 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo. Thank you so much for sitting with us through that quick break. We're back with some more news. Recreational weed is legal in Michigan now. Yay! But it's not all happy news. We have an article from the Detroit Free Press. Minorities find themselves almost shut out of Michigan's marijuana business, and we want to talk about it.
Okay, so here for a little context, I'll read a little bit of the article. So, when Margot Brunner looked into the possibility of getting a license to enter the blossoming marijuana industry, she realized she would face some barriers that might be impossible to overcome. The Novi resident has bachelor's and master's degrees and worked in the logistics industry, which would be handy schools if she was able to get a secure transporter license. But she also had gone through a divorce, which led to a bankruptcy that could be a disqualifying factor if she applied for a medical marijuana business license from the state. Plus, the financial requirements to get into the industry is a $6,000 state application fee, $66,000 state regulatory assessments, $5,000 application fee from a local municipality, and proof of $200,000 in assets were an exorbitant hurdle. I understood very early on that I wouldn't qualify. Number one was the capital requirement, and I knew that the bankruptcy would potentially put me in jeopardy, she said. But I was still completely driven to get involved in the industry in some capacity. She is now the political director for the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, a Lansing-based advocacy group for the marijuana industry. In that capacity, she has been able to see the obstacles she confronted in getting directly involved in the marijuana industry are also problems facing others in the African American community. Under the medical marijuana law passed in 2016, the state isn't required to keep track of the demographics of the people who get licensed in the industry. And because of the state law, that bans affirmative action programs for university admissions and public employment. There are no set-asides for medical marijuana licenses for minority communities. As a result, the exact number of African American-owned marijuana businesses isn't known, but Brunner estimates that out of the 233 licenses awarded by the state, only a handful have been given to minorities. Roughly 4 or 5 dispensaries and 1 grower. In a city like Detroit, where African Americans make up 80% of the population, only a couple of the 24 or so licenses have gone to blacks. It's an untenable situation, said former Senator Coleman Young II, a Democrat from Detroit, who since leaving office in 2018 because of term limits, has started Coleman Young Consulting, a firm that helps communities and individuals looking to get into the cannabis business. It's terrible, a complete missed opportunity, he said, of the lack of minorities in the industry. What we need to start talking about is the economic development opportunities that come with marijuana and its ability to change lives, transform economies, and provide jobs for people who desperately need work.
Yeah, and again, this is from the Detroit Free Press. The article is written by Kathleen Gray. You can find it online. No paywall, so thank you, Free Press. Thank you so much for that. Now, the article just also has a breakdown of marijuana business owners and founders by race. It's exactly 81% white. No decimal there. Other, 6.7%. Hispanic and Latino, 5.7%. African American at 4.3%. And Asian at 2.4%. So those are the statistics on marijuana business owners and founders by race. So there's so many issues here. I think this really can be broken down into 3 parts. We have the issue of, one, it's just extremely cost prohibitive to get into the marijuana business in Michigan to begin with. So it's obviously going to, favor people with access to capital. But on top of this, we have an issue in that a good portion of the way the legalizing of weed was, proposed, and I don't know if you heard any of this rhetoric, was the idea that weed being illegal very much harms minority communities.
Right.
So the idea behind legalizing it was, at least in part, helping these communities. But as these stats show, they're not opening businesses in these communities and stuff because the licensing requirements are so just absurdly expensive. And then as the article also notes, and I think this is point 3, in Michigan, because of state law, there is no affirmative action for at any capacity in the state. No set-asides for medical marijuana licenses for minority communities. So I think this is sort of a multifaceted issue, but I guess first I just want to ask you, Aya, does this surprise you? Because as much as I was a proponent for legalization, I kind of expected it to turn out like this. I assumed it was going to be, I hate to use the term because it's still such a new industry, but quote-unquote big marijuana, I felt like was going to be the real winner here. Were you expecting more like grassroots, sort of like small business,
I feel like that's the image that I had in my head, but even if it was kind of like grassroots small businesses, it would still be in predominantly white communities. Like, I'm not surprised at all that now that it's legal, they've created stop gates for it and then large fees so that it prevents people, especially people of color, who have been faced by, like, intergenerationally a lack of wealth and then an inability to grow wealth. And it has just taken, you can make the argument that the selling of marijuana when it was an illegal drug, like on the streets and stuff like that, was a way to kind of like grow wealth in those communities and keep it in those communities. And it has taken that and yet again taken something from those communities when it was seen as something that would be giving back, which is, it's a shame. Not surprising, but definitely a shame.
Definitely. And I want to talk, I know it's not specific to this, but this point about state law in Michigan being against affirmative action, just in general, but as it applies to this as well, this actually came up in one of the first ethics class I ever took. It was with Dr. John Zachman up at Northwestern Michigan College. Fantastic man, would not be here without him. But we were just discussing the question of affirmative action, and admittedly at the time I was young, I was against it, but I was presented with an argument that I found very convincing, and now that I've heard the argument and sort of adopted it, it just makes perfect sense to me. If you think of so the argument against affirmative action, at least as I've heard it presented, is typically that, well, it's not fair, it's giving people advantages that didn't earn. And I don't think that's true. I think that's a lot of dog whistles and stuff used not necessarily just by racists, but, and I say this coming from, a very white farm town conservative community, people who are at least okay with supporting racists, is where I hear that rhetoric come from. But let's say it's true. My issue with that rhetoric is that it assumes merit is the be-all, end-all goal of all institutions. And I don't think that is necessarily the case. For example, let's use the example of universities, as the Detroit Free Press does. The goal of a university, I think, is to produce knowledge via research and also distribute that knowledge to students to create a more well-rounded, well-educated populace. That is the goal of a university. Now, in my personal experience, but I've also read data to back this up. It was for a research paper in that ethics class, actually. I don't have the exact stats on me, but I think I would agree with this. Diversity by nature, just being in a diverse environment, makes you a more well-rounded person.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. So diversity makes you well-rounded, and it also contributes, especially in the social sciences, to better research. I'm in political science, and while you try to be objective in everything in your research, everyone has blind spots, especially if you're like me and you come from a very privileged place. So working in diverse groups in academia can also help to address those blind spots and perhaps ask research questions that might not otherwise be asked, or perhaps find blind spots within the research, finding explanations for things that someone in a privileged position might not immediately recognize. So from that perspective, if we accept that the goal of the university is to create and distribute knowledge, programs like affirmative action can actually help that, because diversity has been shown to strongly help in both those aspects. And if the goal of the university is to do that, it wouldn't make sense not to. And merit, therefore, is not the ultimate goal. So once I heard that, that was kind of a high-level ethical argument. But once I heard that, I completely changed my position on it. And especially, despite what Fox News tells you, most affirmative action isn't literally, hey, this person's a minority, so we're going to give them a job or a position. It's not that. It's never been that. So it's usually a bad faith argument. But again, that seems very weird to me. There are no set-asides for marijuana licenses for minority communities. It seems backwards when, again, this whole thing was pushed. And granted, it's good, and I don't want it to be illegal again. But it was pushed on the idea of there are communities that have been oppressed. And this could, as you said, be a way of generating wealth in these communities. And it clearly just isn't happening. And I think it really goes to show, we talk about this in class a lot, and I think it bears some discussion. Racism, and you went actually to the Kendi lecture,
yes,
right? So this idea that racism isn't something you are, it's something that you do, basically.
Right.
And that it can be systematic. So to that point, I think this is just a small example, and granted, this is awful. Realistically, not the most harmful example, but it's certainly an example of just the systemic racism,
right, in
the system. This is something that honestly might not have been intended. There might not be, some evil mustache-twirling person sitting in Lansing being like, aha, finally. But our systems were created by white men, for white men, and they benefit white men more than anyone. So we talked about this a lot on the show. A big part of it is systemic reform.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those interesting spots where race and class kind of intertwine to create the perfect storm. Because when you look at it, it really does seem like a class issue, where this also ties into the affirmative action argument. When you're looking at colleges, especially top-tier liberal arts schools and the Ivy Leagues, if you just have a race requirement with affirmative action, it brings it so yes, you do have racial diversity, but you have no economic diversity within that racial diversity. So you're picking from the students of color from the richest families in the country. And then that still does nothing to help the students that affirmative action is intending to help, students that don't have access to the same opportunities to get the same grades and do as well on test scores as students from more wealthy communities. And it seems like one of those. And then what I always land on with affirmative action is yes, on paper it's not fair, but it's just. And then this seems like one of those other things where it's yeah, on paper you wouldn't think hey, you're giving out all these free handouts to low-income communities. That's not fair. No, it's not fair, but it's just, because you have to think about the history of the country and what ramifications that history has on the current time. And then you have to deal with it accordingly.
Thank you. You're going to have to let me borrow that phrase. It's not fair, but it's just, because I've been trying to say that, but I'm not, I don't do words as well. So thank you. That's really it. I have more I want to talk about just with the marijuana legalization in general. But do you have any more about this story you want to say?
I don't think so in particular. It would be really nice if they changed it to better suit low-income communities, but quite honestly, you could call me a pessimist, but I don't think that they'll change it, which is really sad.
I can't say that they will either. I'd be interested to see what the stats are on other states. 'Cause I know some have more stringent requirements for getting license, and others have less.
Yeah.
So curious to see what effect that has. But also on the topic of marijuana legalization, this happened actually a few weeks ago, but the more I think about it, the angrier it makes me. So we're going to talk about it anyway. So Michigan state government halted the sale of THC oil cartridges for use with vape pens in dispensaries out of concern for people's lungs. When I first read that, basically the cartridges have to be sent back for testing. When I first read that, I'm like, it sounds annoying, but whatever, like, it's for people's health. But then the more I thought about it and the more I looked, as of right now, the state of Michigan, at least, position is that they believe vitamin E acetate is what's causing these lung diseases. However, it has not been found in any licensed cartridge from a licensed dispensary. It's only been found in black market cartridges, at least from the reading I found. This being the case to me, and knowing that these cartridges in dispensaries have already been tested, I think this was a move to, if not intentionally, very accidentally, cripple the recreational market when it opened. Because I've been able to find stats that say in Michigan, at least, about 30% of most medical dispensaries' revenue was oil cartridges. And presumably then that would also be about a third of a recreational dispensary's revenue. And they can't sell them now that they're open. But these are cartridges that have already been tested, and, well, now they have to be tested again, which is expensive. And moreover, this halt does nothing to stop, Joe Blow, who's making his own black market cartridges and, selling them. And those are the cartridges that were found to have the vitamin, E acetate. So my question here is, isn't all this doing is taking away the safer alternative and pushing people, because I just say it, no one's going to stop, vaping because they can't go to a dispensary. They're not going to. They're going to get it from some guy who may or may not have a safe cartridge. So to me, it just seems like pushing people to a dangerous alternative.
Yeah, that definitely seems accurate. And I looked into the story when it first came out about the vape cartridges becoming regulated, but I didn't even think about it from that point of view. And I know that there are definitely still people who vape because it's an addictive substance. And I feel like it's one of those things where it's like you can't just make it illegal. You have to go and set up a treatment plan, and it takes a lot more work. But unfortunately, we have landed ourselves in another situation where people are addicted to a substance and they need to be helped. And unfortunately, it seems like it's a younger generation now, but yeah.
Exactly. I just wanted to kind of rant about that. With that, we're going to take a quick break, play some PSAs and such, and then when we get back, we have the fine folk from Extinction Rebellion with us, so we're going to head and chat with them about what they did on Black Friday. That coming right up on the Hoodrat Strategist radio program here on 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo.
Thank you. Thank you.
The old Indian tribal.
We did that earlier, right?
Kind of.
Yeah. Hello, Wider listeners. I'm Ryan Pate, the drummer for Quantum Fleet DJ Magic. If you are so inclined, this arrangement of fellows will be playing Michigan Peace Festival this weekend, Sunday at 3 p.m., I believe.
3:30, maybe?
3:30. Around in there, but we will be there in that approximate time, in that approximate location, the Elderberry Farms, with a bunch of great other bands, including Ginger Baker's son playing with Joe Marcinek Band, Sonder Green, Genome, Funk Vendetta, a bunch of... Anyway, back to the music here. DJ Bosco laying down some piano soundscapes for you.
This is George W. Bush, and you're listening to 89.1 WIDR, Kalamazoo, Michigan, Kalamazoo. You know what you're listening to, Kalamazoo, Michigan, man. What are you, stupid?
Thank you so much for waiting with us over that quick break. I hope Quantum Fleet kept you company. I hope you enjoyed that. So I am holding, I know you can't see it, we're on the radio, but a flyer right now. Looks like something you might see ahead of Black Friday. Time is running out. Biodiversity blowout sale. Insect species 10% threatened. Amphibian species 40% threatened. Global wetlands 85% lost since 1700. And northern right rhino sold out. How long can we go? For context, I'm just going to read you a bit from an MLive piece. This by Brad Devereaux. I'd like to thank Brad for all of his wonderful news. It gives us a lot to talk about. Climate activists host die-in on Black Friday at Michigan Mall. Demonstrators pretend to be dead. Oh, that is a caption for a photo. Excuse me, you can't see that. We are on the radio. Portage, Michigan. People sprawled out on the floor of the Crossroads Mall Friday were not worn out from Black Friday shopping. Instead, they were tired of the way society is structured and demanded changes to address what they see as a climate crisis. 9 demonstrators, mostly clad in black outfits, were seen on the ground next to a makeshift coffin in the Portage Mall on Friday, November 29th, as retail stores held annual sales on the most famous shopping day. I'm actually sitting here with Paul LaFerrier and Jared Matthews from Extinction Revolution.
Rebellion.
Rebellion. All right. I thought that first. I'm like, no, it's Extinction Rebellion. And they want to talk to you about what they're about. So, with that,
thanks for having us, Will. The Black Friday event was on that day because Greta Thunberg and the other student strikers had called for another day of action after the very successful September 20th date. And I don't know if Greta knew or whatever that day is Black Friday in the U.S., but there was students around the world, again, not as many as September, but getting out there and showing that they want to defend their future. And locally, we wanted to do something in support of that. And Black Friday makes some of us kind of think of funerals and death and, not the happy thoughts. So we decided to do a little funeral march down Westnedge and leading up to the Crossroads Mall.
And so I was part of the planning group or the working group for the funeral march / die-in Crossroads, and initially we had like 9 people on the books to attend, but we had when it actually started, we had, I want to say, about 20 or 22 people join us, which is fantastic. We had 3 banners. One was an Extinction Rebellion banner, and then another one was advertising the 2019 Earth Day event happening in Kalamazoo, and then had Save Our Children on the other side of it. That was made by Alan Webb, who's a professor here at Western Michigan, which is really cool. And we marched down Westnedge. It was a lot of traffic. Got some supportive honks, nothing too threatening to our message, so that was awesome. We left about 10:45, 10:50, and walked about, I think, a mile down Westnedge to Mall Drive, then to Crossroads. But I guess we didn't realize that the mall security is, I guess, smarter than we initially thought, because they intercepted us before we even got to the mall. But Paul and I were talking earlier before this interview, and we just kind of put our heads down and just kept on walking. And there was about 4 to 5 security guards outside, and they tried to stop us. We had a huge, 6-foot globe that we were carrying down Westnedge, which I thought was pretty badass. But we had to put that down. Luckily, we had a handful of members. They were able to guard the globe for us, which is sweet. And then we walked in, beat security to it. 12 of us total made it into the mall, and we put out. The coffin was in front of what? I can't remember the store.
Near the escalator.
Yeah, one of the escalators over there. And yeah, was it 9 people died? Paul was one of the dead people. I was one of the photographers and security guard liaisons. And we laid down and died for about 5 or so minutes. And the security guards were obviously on to us at that point. After the 3rd warning, I knew that we kind of would have to leave pretty soon. And then 4th warning, they said the cops were on their way. And okay, team, we got to get up and get out of here. And I mean, the die-in was very peaceful. It drew a huge, huge crowd around it. Unfortunately, those photos were taken really, really early on in the die-in, which kind of sucks. So we can't see the crowd. But it was just a very peaceful protest. And then we packed up our stuff and hit Westnedge again. Did a nice funeral march on the way back as well. And we called it a day at that point, or at least a morning, because we did another another direct action that afternoon at Bronson Park at the tree lighting downtown. So, yeah.
So yeah, we wanted to make sure Jared was here since I was lying down with my eyes closed. I couldn't really tell you what was going on while we were doing that, but it's hard to know how to talk about the die-in. I mean, it's serious, but on the other hand, it's obviously it's a theatrical thing. Some would say it's a stunt or something, and so I think lying there on the floor of the mall, it's just an unusual thing. You don't see that every day. It's gonna make people think. So I didn't think this is me personally, this action wasn't so much a protest. I mean, we're not, I shop, we all shop. Some people need to take advantage of those sales. It's not, I think Chris explains in the article, it's not about shaming people, but we want to let the people who care deeply about the climate know that there's other people that are feeling very serious about it. So I had talked to other activists who had done die-ins. It's obviously not a brand new thing. And they told me, it can be depressing to be in the die-in because you're lying there, you're maybe you're thinking about all the things that are at risk or things that have died. On the other hand, you can approach it kind of like an actor and you're playing a role. And I think I went back and forth between that. But the people I talked to afterward, we all felt very peaceful and glad that we were doing what we were doing there.
And it was, when we were planning the event, we weren't sure on like the messaging that we wanted to do because we didn't want to shame consumers on Black Friday. But I do have some numbers on Black Friday. So this
Please
year,
share. I like numbers on the show.
This year, there was $4.2 billion in sales on Thanksgiving, just online sales. Brick and mortar sales are hard to keep track of and get right away, but they are expected to be down by about 6%. On Black Friday itself, it looks like I saw two different numbers. One was 5.4 billion, another was 7.4 billion on Black Friday. And then Cyber Monday is massive. They saw $9.4 billion in sales just this past Cyber Monday, and those are numbers from Adobe and then another big firm. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But Amazon is killing the game. They've seen, I believe, an increase in like 138% over this decade in like Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and Cyber Monday sales. $143 billion will be spent this holiday season, and $81.5 billion will come from November 1st to December 2nd this year. And so, like, obviously, like, holidays are important here in the United States. We like buying gifts. But it's important to keep in mind that, like, obviously we want to get our gifts fast. We are kind of lazy. We don't get our gifts till the last minute. But there are ways to buy gifts for people in a greener way. Amazon Prime leaves a larger footprint than slower shipping options. Obviously, online shopping is greener than going to the brick and mortar physical store. But if you get the expedited shipping and over these slower shipping options, you pretty much cancel out that carbon footprint decrease. That's an MIT study that was done last year. And also, fun fact, boomers like Black Friday the most. They spend on average $626 per boomer. Gen X, $459, and then millennials, $252. So
it's almost a 50% drop just between Gen X and.
Well, we have no money.
That is true.
Yeah, we have no money. And as I said, retail is declining. We're seeing an average increase of Black Friday sales and Cyber Monday sales of about 2.5% annually. It would be higher, but the 2008 recession, we saw a huge deflation in sales. So it was we weren't sure if we wanted to target consumers, but having that data out there, I think, is really, really important.
Definitely. Personally, I just really appreciated the imagery. You said it's been done before, but your die-in is the first one I've actually ever heard of. And as a young person, I'm 21 years old, I look at climate change as a bit of a life or death issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people don't. So did that play into the imagery at all?
Oh yeah, this is urgent now. You know, we're out of decades to waste, and this ship, the global economy, isn't going to turn on a dime. The Secretary General of the UN says, you know, we have to get strong mechanisms in place, and like by the end of next year, hugely important election coming up in the U.S. and we're just a species that's going to have to learn to cooperate on an unprecedented scale real fast because there's no other good choices.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 25, so I'm a little bit older, but whenever I vote, like, that is my number one issue. I actually work on a congressional campaign, and I manage a state house campaign, and like those are what I want to work on, are those issues. But to some people in Michigan, like climate change, we aren't seeing the effects just yet. They aren't as significant as some people are seeing, like on the coast or in developing or third world countries. So we're lucky in that regard, but we think we have to really pay attention. Like up in South Haven, they're seeing huge beach erosion. Their sand dunes are gone. Same is going down in, I believe, Silver Beach down in St. Joseph, and climate change factors into those as well. So we have to really take a look at our lifestyles, the systems in place, the institutions, and I think XR is the only group in the area that is taking direct action, and we're getting our message across. So like what the city of Kalamazoo passed a climate crisis declaration, the township has, and then the county this past week, along party lines, unfortunately. So 9 Democrats, 2 Republicans. The county passed a climate crisis declaration, which is awesome. We're seeing movement in Kalamazoo. Hopefully that spreads around the state.
Hopefully. I just want to say thank you again for like trying to do this, because for a long time, I'm from the Traverse City area, and for a long time there was no discussion really about how climate change would affect the city, which was crazy to me because it's a tourist town. And over this summer, most of the beaches in the area were just not usable. Yeah. There was no beach. And we finally started seeing discussion of climate change up there. And I'm like, it shouldn't have gotten to the point where that's the catalyst. So really, thank you. It looked like you had something to say, Jared.
Yeah, America is, at least our political system is based on incrementalism in policy. But the time for environmental incrementalism is over. We need to act now. We have by the end of the decade to really make, substantive changes to our policy to address the climate crisis. And, leaving the Paris Climate Agreement's not the way to do it. And obviously the Kalamazoo County passing a climate crisis declaration is huge, but that's only a declaration. We need more substantive policy to, actually address the climate crisis here in Kalamazoo and all of Southwest Michigan. But once again, thank you, commissioners, for passing that. We really appreciate it. And also thank you, Commissioner Hall, for thanking us for planting that tree at the Christmas tree lighting on Black Friday. Thank you.
Yeah, at the Christmas tree lighting, some of our members planted a tree in front of City Hall, and it had a plaque with it. We're going to give a permanent plaque, and it's to thank the city and memorialize the climate emergency declaration. And, this tree is there to sort of remind us all to act accordingly and make it a real transformation as much as we can in our local area. And the local government resolutions are great, and they recognize that they really need support from the state and federal level. So we're hoping other counties are passing. I think Washtenaw County or Ann Arbor, City of Ann Arbor, has passed a resolution, and so the state needs to hear from the localities in the county and, onward with the pressure, basically. Yeah, that's we also did as sort of just a fun, the tree lighting event is like a family event, and we had a few people dress up as animals, like a green-nosed reindeer, everyone's turning green, a polar bear with a Extinction Rebellion sign, and he's super friendly guy and posing for pictures with kids, and it was like a line. It was like Santa Claus almost, and he's gently telling them, it's getting too warm where I live, and we need to, take care of the earth for all the animals and all the children. And it's so good to hear people just talking about that, because it's almost like it's been a taboo to talk about the seriousness of the issue. It's scary. The big NGOs were afraid to scare people, and so they wanted to say, do your little lifestyle thing and try and be a better citizen, and sort of putting the blame on the people when it's really this whole system that we have. And it was so refreshing for me when I learned about Extinction Rebellion, which only really publicly burst on the scene in the UK a year ago, that their first demand was tell the truth. And when the society has kind of drifted and ignored the truth for a long time, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act, and it certainly appealed to me.
Awesome. Could you speak a little bit more, both of you actually, on how you got involved with Extinction Rebellion?
So I've only been involved for the past 3 months. I initially learned of the group when I was helping organize the climate strike back in September. And I met the founders, at least of the Kalamazoo chapter, Chris and Joetta Carr, and I was kind of blown away by what they were doing, and the traffic stop on September 20th. It caused waves, and at least in the local media market, the M Live video had, I think, almost 200,000 hits. So they started something. I started attending meetings, which, by the way, they are every Sunday. Make sure to follow our Facebook and Twitter for updates. It is at XRKZoo. Every Sunday we meet, and right now we don't have any actions planned just right now. This winter we're kind of looking at building our base, building some coalitions and relationships with groups. But the climate strike was huge. I wanted to keep that momentum going. We can't just have like one day a year of climate action. We need it every single day of the year. So if you'd like to get involved, please follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Yeah.
It's sort of hard to explain Extinction Rebellion. It's a nonviolent movement for urgent action on climate. It has some formal demands, and it's based on a study of history and academic scholarship about, what we need: urgent change quickly, big transformational change. What's going to give us the best odds of that? And it's really like the civil resistance model, which we kind of associate with Tahrir Square or movements in other countries of overthrowing dictators, but we need to do that to transform our society. Really, our political system has a lot of problems, and reform is maybe it can be reformed, but it has to be very deep. And there's so many veto and checkpoints in our system. It wasn't designed to react quickly. So people use analogies of World War II mobilization, and that's like the level of involvement that we're going to need from the government. Like little or even big voluntary actions are not going to be enough. So how do you make that happen, or how do you give yourselves a chance to have that happen? And it's sort of the civil resistance model, which involves large numbers of people taking disobedient actions and forcing the government's hand basically to meet the demands. So there was a tweet, I think, from XR UK. We call it XR because Extinction Rebellion is kind of a mouthful. Civil resistance in 6 steps. And step 1 is you need the numbers. And we're still working on getting the numbers in the U.S. For people that really want to see what this is hopefully going to look like here, you can look to what's happened in the UK, where they had, tens of thousands of people shutting down large portions of the capital city and generating 1,800 arrests, for instance, in London. And these are arrests on sort of small charges. These are misdemeanor type offenses. And the more people that one gets involved, sort of the safer it is, and the more power that you're showing as a movement.
And for people afraid of getting involved because you're getting arrested, you're going to get a few warnings, and it's not that scary. I had to deal with some cops and some security guards. It wasn't that bad. They're not terrible human beings. But yeah, cops give you at least 3 to 4 warnings before you actually run into trouble of maybe getting arrested, or don't be violent as well. Like the die-in, we just laid on the ground. We weren't screaming. We weren't trying to really draw like that much attention. So, but hopefully we have more stuff coming up, and we'll let you guys know.
The other thing is obviously, so I'm an early retired guy. I can get arrested. I haven't been arrested yet. I'm gonna choose my spots, but younger people with their careers ahead of them, it's a little trickier, and it's not a thing you want to do lightly. I personally, though, feel like in 10 or 20 years, you're going to be looked at as a hero if you took an arrest for climate action in 2020. So it's not all about that, and we understand that it's not for everyone, and we need 5, 10, as many people as we can get supporting those people that are willing to be arrested and that can do it. So we try not to glamorize getting arrested. It's not something that people want to do, but it's part of our strategy and our model for getting the kind of change we need. So we invite people to consider it, we offer, trainings and nonviolent direct action, and it's a good thing to know about. And it's very bonding experience to do these kind of street actions, whether they're arrestable or not. It's a little empowering, and a lot of us sitting at home reading about climate change don't feel very empowered. So the thing to do is to take some action, not by yourself, but with other people.
Exactly. To that point, I actually took a class on U.S. history, but specifically just during the 60s and 70s in community college. And something our professor said I thought was very profound. I'm trying to remember the exact phrasing, but it was to the extent of no one wants to get arrested, but when your movement starts getting people arrested, you've basically not attacked, but the right people are interested now in what's going on.
Which, Paul, has anybody from XRKZU been arrested for any direct action yet?
No. The police are not arresting us, and we're not courting that at this moment. We participated in a larger action in Chicago during what XR worldwide called the Autumn Rebellion, and we occupied streets in the Loop for 3 hours, and the bicycle cops sort of herded us, and it was kind of a roving street party. There was people certainly willing to get arrested, but it's a game. I hate to say a game because it's so serious, but in a sense, it's a game we play with the authorities, right? They know arrests are going to bring attention and solidarity and support, so they might let you break the law and not arrest you. So, or they might just arrest you when you're doing something legal. I mean, yeah. They are the ones that have that call, right? So we try and prepare people for various eventualities, and we talk about, green, yellow, and red zone actions and things like that. So there's of course a whole history of direct action, civil disobedience, People tend to admire it in history books, but right now we haven't seen a lot of it in the mainstream. Now, of course, there's been Standing Rock, there's pipeline activists, and these people are doing great work and they're taking bigger risks. But the XR strategy is a little different in that we're focused on the government and system change, because in our analysis, that's what we need. Shutting down or slowing down fossil fuel infrastructure projects one by one, it's heroic work, but it's costly, and ultimately we need to kind of take power over the whole system. So that's what we need. It's not easy, and we need help. So if you're listening to this, don't think Extinction Rebellion is going to save you. We need everyone out there to pitch in to the extent they can.
Well, again, I know I've said before, but thank you for what you're doing. And we have a little bit time left. I'm just curious, what do you think? You'd mentioned some things. What do you think the next steps are? You mentioned with needing state and federal, assistance beyond just local municipal governments.
It's difficult. We don't really know the next stage right now. We're trying to plan some more actions. We have some ideas, but at least XRKZoo right now, we're focused on base building, getting more people involved. We need more young people. No offense to XRKZoo, but it's a lot of old people there, which is great to see. The older generation caring so much about their future, even though they may not be here. That's great, but we need more college students. So if you're listening, please show up. It's great. They're a lot of fun. But right now it's just a lot of scheduling meetings, meeting people, and messaging. Yeah.
Also, obviously, we want big cities. Our local chapter, was the first one in Michigan, and we used to call ourselves Southwest Michigan, but we're sort of changing our name to Kalamazoo, and part of the reason is because other chapters are springing up in Michigan. We were helping get Grand Rapids started. There's Lansing, there's East Lansing, our chapters, Ann Arbor. Toledo has a chapter with a really good website, and I helped bring the XR message to those folks. So we're spreading, we're networking. If you have local groups that you want to hear an Extinction Rebellion pitch or talk, or maybe form your own affinity group so you can join us in an action later, we want to set that up. So get in touch.
Through Facebook or Twitter. Yes.
Through Facebook or Twitter.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being on the show. That was honestly enlightening. And just on a personal note, I might actually send your way. I have ties to climate protesters up in the Grand Traverse area, but something they've been struggling with is they're not strictly organized. But I feel like they definitely want to.
Yeah, if they've been doing stuff, we can, help plug them into our network and connect them with other people up there. It'd be great to connect with indigenous water protectors and the things they're doing around Line 5. And there's lots of connections. There's a lot of people doing good stuff. And there's, Sunrise Movement. There's more inside game political groups, even, Sierra Club, Citizens Climate Lobby, all these partners in the KCCC, which is Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition, something like that. Yeah. So good people doing, working on this problem. We need everyone working on it in various ways, but we feel like the social power in the street is going to be a key thing to push everything else forward.
All right. Well, thank you. That's kind of all the time we got before we have to go break. But again, just thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. Again, as a young person wanting to grow old, kind of the biggest issue there is I like having, a planet to live on. So thank you.
There is no planet B, and thanks for having us, Will.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
As nice as the one that is near my mouth. Everyone knows that I love a good microphone, touching the lips like a lover's kiss.
Why do you come to the Saturday morning cartoon show?
Because I wanted to do one of those funny things like, and you ever watch F Troop where Agarn says, there's no way I'm wearing a dress, absolutely not, no dress, and Forrest Tucker's like, yeah, you're wearing that dress, you're gonna wear that dress, and then they wipe, and Agarn's wearing a dress.
Every Saturday from 9 to 11, right here on Wider.
Can't get enough Radio Evolution? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook to find updates on all things Wider, including upcoming shows and events, exclusive interviews, and ticket giveaways to your favorite live music venues in Kalamazoo.
Freak out, yo!
When you're not smashing that like button, be sure to keep it tuned to 89.1.
Yo! Put that cookie down now!
You're listening to WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for Radio Evolution.
Welcome back to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program here on 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo. We only have a few minutes left in the show, a little less than 10. But with that, we still have one more story we want to talk about, a bit more national in scope. So, Kamala Harris, since last Wednesday, has dropped out of her presidential campaign, just dropped out of the race for the Democratic nomination. And I'm just going to read you a few paragraphs from the article Politico put out on this. Let's see, written by Christopher Cadelgo and Caitlin Oprisco. So, and this is the article again from Politico. Kamala Harris is ending her presidential campaign after months of failing to lift her candidacy from the bottom of the field. A premature departure for a California senator once heralded as a top-tier contender for the nomination. Harris told aides of her intentions in an all-staff call on Tuesday, and a person familiar with the conversation said she sounded distraught. While Harris had qualified for the December debate in her home state later this month, she was running dangerously low on cash, lacking the resources to air TV ads in Iowa, and her staff was gripped by long-running internal turmoil. Still, the news came as a shock to some of her biggest supporters. Just as Harris was announcing the news internally, a super PAC had cleared more than $100 million in TV ads in Iowa to boost her struggling campaign. The ad, which argues she was the best equipped candidate to take on President Donald Trump, was canceled. So, where to begin with this? First, and I'm just going to use the language used here by Politico, premature departure for a California senator once labeled as a top-tier contender. I don't mean to speak for anyone else but my own here, but I haven't met anyone who was a Kamala Harris fan. I don't know a single person who said, that's who I want to win the primary. I know a lot of people who said, I'll definitely vote for her over Donald Trump. But in terms of a primary election, have you seen anyone who really wanted Kamala Harris?
No, absolutely not.
It gets into this. This came up in 2016 with the surprise election of Donald Trump. I don't know where these polls were getting the number. Well, obviously they were getting it from responses, but there must be something up. Because in all my time, again, don't know anyone who wanted Kamala Harris. But what does this mean going forward now that she is not in for it? No longer in action. So who are the Kamala Harris voters, of which I don't know any, going to? Now, I saw some speculation that it might be a pretty even split amongst candidates, but what I'm seeing here on Politico, and I saw this earlier in the New York Times, is that it looks like most of her voters are going to Mayor Pete and Joe Biden. So no longer are they splitting, their votes amongst candidates. These votes are going primarily to them. At least that's what Politico and New York Times are expecting to happen. So, what do you think about this?
One thing that I have seen pretty frequently is, because I'll just like compare and contrast what you see on the news if you watch like morning talk shows or anything like that, or what you'll see on something like Twitter or YouTube personalities who cover news and politics. It seems like people who are her supporters aren't really focusing on her policies, at least, or so I've seen at least. And in my opinion, when you really take a look at her policies, she's not as progressive as the audience that she wants to target. And then it seemed like she flip-flopped on a lot of things, especially healthcare. And then she couldn't really justify her record as a prosecutor well, which kind of went against especially the black community when she was trying to get their vote. And it is sad when anyone has to drop out of an election, but I don't think it'll make that big of a difference, because I could understand how in certain demographics she was very popular, but when it comes to young voters or minorities and people who aren't very invested in politics, I don't think anybody was very drawn to her.
Exactly. It's a weird case of too progressive for the kind of people who would want Biden, for example, but nowhere near progressive enough for most Sanders and Warren supporters I know. Granted, I can't really say that about Warren anymore, though, because one of the big things was that Harris, was very wishy-washy on Medicare for all, and now Warren is starting to talk back some for Medicare for all talk. So it's kind of the same boat, but just in general, I know we were talking about this over the break. I'm deeply concerned that this is just a symbol that, or a sign again, that the Democrats are going to put up another candidate like Hillary Clinton that, well, honestly, probably would be better than Donald Trump. A lot of people don't like, and I think Donald Trump's going to win 2020 again. At this point, I like Sanders. Having seen what happened in 2016, I don't know if he can get the nomination. And are there any candidates that you really are confident could beat Trump? Because I think there's some candidates where we might get a very close race that could go either way. But aside from Sanders, there aren't any candidates right now that I'm looking at them like this is a landslide victory.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Sanders would definitely 100% beat Trump, and then with the other candidates, I'm not really sure. Maybe Elizabeth Warren, but that would be a long shot. But I think it definitely would be, with so much conflict and infighting within the Democratic Party, it would be very difficult for Sanders to win the primary, especially when you factor that in with how little people report on him and talk about him in spaces where older voters are. And I think he often gets a bad rap more than he should, and I feel like that's going to be a really big detriment to his campaign, which is really unfortunate because that's not really something he can change. That's the responsibility of others, not him, which is sad.
True. I want to point out, I think you may have actually brought up something that I think might answer our question of who is Kamala Harris's base. I think it might have been older voters, because now that I think of it, granted, not many of my older relatives tend to vote Democrat, but even amongst those few who do, and others, I hear a lot of discussion about Booker and Harris, or before she dropped out, heard a lot about Harris from my older relatives, and it always was weird to me because while they're candidates, at least amongst my peers, they were never front runners. So we never talked about them. We talked about Warren and Sanders. Talked about Biden because even if you don't like him, just in politics, he's a big enough player. You can't avoid talking about him. but I never really talked about Booker or Harris other than sort of to mention they were there. But now that you bring that up about getting like Sanders into places where older voters hear about him,
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to think that might be the demographic that was behind Harris, because I know when I was home for Thanksgiving and had to watch some Fox News at my great-grandparents' house, they talked a lot about Harris and Booker. And I'm thinking perhaps that the media that targets those older generations was pushing them more as front runners, and that's why I was completely blindsided by her popularity.
Yeah. I feel like another thing that really contributes to her popularity is the fact that she's of color, which is, I try to shy away from identity politics when it comes to politics, and race when it comes to politics, unless you're talking about policy. Mm-hmm. But one article that I read, I think it was yesterday, when I was looking more into Kamala Harris's campaign, was the entire subject of the article was just that the field of frontrunners is all white again. And I was like, wait, why are we talking about that? Why don't we talk about their policies? Because you don't have to be a minority to help minorities. So I think that's something that helped her a lot, and I think that's something that might, as long as people focus on that so heavily, I think it could be of detriment to someone like Sanders or Warren, who really want to do good things for people of color and low-income communities.
Exactly, especially considering you brought this up earlier, Harris's, history as a prosecutor.
Yeah.
I was looking at some of the sentences, and again, a lot of these were just for marijuana possession charges. There were some absurd. First of all, any possession charge for marijuana is absurd in my view. But I'm talking like not just a year or 9 days. There were some like decade plus sentences in there that I just couldn't wrap my head around. I'd actually love to talk more about this in the 2020 election, because I want to say I'm excited for it, but honestly, I'm just nervous. I'm looking at, getting my $6,000 I need to be able to move to the Netherlands. Real story. That's the plan right now. But we are actually going to have to end our show. We have someone coming on after us. So again, thank you so much for joining us here today on the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. I'm William Walton.
And I am Aya Miller.
Have a wonderful night.